So this was probably a Turkish prisoner of war who gave it to grandfather as a thank you. Also involved very much with music in the First World War was Cecil Coles, who was one of Scotland's leading composers. And I knew his daughter, who rescued his music from a cupboard. And he's now, quite prominent in the history of Scottish music. And she left me these two objects in his memory. And these here are the buttons from my grandfather's Royal Army Medical Corps coat, which I put inside this box and turned into a rattle. And at the climax of this particular piece, it's as loud as it possibly can be for the deafening sound of just shells constantly falling. This would be at Gallipoli. And then it ends with the death rattle of these little buttons inside the shell. So I think that's about right to end with a rattling of old bones. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much, John. That was absolutely fascinating. Brilliant, and great that we got the sound there sorted as well. Okay, thanks for sticking with us. So we're still waiting to find out what's where Nick is gone. Hopefully we'll get that sorted, but we have planned anyway a scheduled short break, so comfort break for everybody. So I'd say let's come back at 11:15. 11:15. That gives you enough time to grab a coffee or whatever, and we'll be back for hopefully Nick and our roundtable discussion with our panelists and artists, and then some Q&As opportunity from the participant audience. So we'll see you at 15:15.
Hi everyone, to folk who are here. I just posted in the chat, if you didn't see it, I believe we have Nick back with us, which is very exciting and a great relief. So we'll hopefully jump into hearing from her as soon as is feasible. And then after that, we'll jump into a few questions amongst the panelists and then open the floor. After that, I have a list of questions that's run off the bottom of the page, so I'm going to try and just pick one of them.
So Nick's going to be sharing. Are you sharing a link to the video, Nick?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, hi.
Okay, would you? Good. Hi, thanks. I'm actually like piggybacking on a neighbour's internet because all of my stuff has gone away, including all my phone reception. So I'm really sorry. I don't know what it is. But
Nope.
would you enable me to start my video to put my camera on?
So, yeah, we have to
Oh,
make
of course.
you a the upgrade. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just so glad that you were able to come back. It's wonderful that you've got a neighbour so accommodating.
I know.
But we're so happy to have you back, and yeah, technology, these things happen.
Oh, I still can't turn my video on there, Cat. I don't know why. But I can just talk. I'll just talk away and see. At least there's a sort of picture of me there looking slightly gormless. So you can see what I look like. Okay, there we go. All right. I hope this connection is okay because I'm sort of across the road on someone else's internet. But yes, I was just talking. I'm so sorry I missed the last bit as well. But I was just talking before I got knocked off there about some of the things that I've done with bells, but I'm by no means an expert. But I first made a piece with bells in Norwich called Circle of Work, where I worked with a group of bell ringers in a church tower. And I made a composition for voice and bells, which we did together, part of a festival called Playing for Time, that was organised by somebody called Lawrence Bradbury. And since then I've just been really into them. I've collected quite a lot of bells. I used to live on a boat for 10 years, so yeah, I don't know, you sort of start coming into contact with bells quite a lot when you live on a boat. Anyway, the piece that I was asked to talk about today was called Turn. And this was a piece that I made for the Govan Graving Docks just outside of Glasgow, which is a huge site really, which has 3 disused old stepped graving docks in this. I suppose it's a sound piece really, but it happened live, so audiences came into the space to witness. And one of the things that I did as part of that piece was I made 28 bells in Govan with different groups. I made each bell with a different group or organization, and they decided what they wanted to be written on the bell. I made this at a place called Galgale. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, but that's also in Govan. And it's a great organisation who work primarily in woodwork, in boat building and things like that. But basically, as part of the project, with them, we built a little foundry in which enabled us to cast these bronze bells. I'm quite embarrassed about the bells when there's like proper bell people here, because they're very sort of rough and ready. They're very kind of like basic in a way. And they're not tuned. So when we came to compose the piece, we worked with whatever the bells came out as. That was basically what we had to work with. So the piece itself, Turn, which featured these bells in it, happened in over 1 month, and there was 3 performances. It was this, these special months where you get 2 full moons in 1 month. So the first performance was on the first day of the month, which was a full moon, Then the next one was on a new moon in the middle of the month, and the final one was on the second full moon, the last day of the month. And each time we had a group of women or a woman whose birthday it was, and they were the sort of subject of the piece. And what happened was they spoke about, we had spent lots of time together talking about the turnings in their life, and they had prepared from those conversations like a little a little monologue, I suppose, of things that they wanted to reflect on as part of their birthday. And their voice was broadcast via a radio signal in the docks, and all of the audience that came were able to listen to their voices in these little boxes that had a little transmitter in there. We didn't use headphones because we wanted to hear the sight, and also because the second sound component was that we had these bells and this choir. The bells and the choir were amplified from inside the dock, so I always liked imagining the dock like as a massive mouth that sort of sang out upwards. So we had this really intimate, like, single voice that you could listen to. And you could choose, I guess, the proximity of that, because you held it in, via this box, and then this more atmospheric sound of bells and voices. Yeah, I don't know if I need to talk too much about it, really, but yeah, I guess I'll show you a video of it in a second. But ringing the bells on these people's birthday. And also, I guess the reason that they came in as an idea in the first place is because in the beginning I was talking to a lot of people about this site and their memories of this place, and somebody had said to me that they had this very clear sort of sound memory of the hammering of ship's hulls in there, which essentially are a giant bell, and that I was really struck by that, and in a way I wanted to recreate this sort of historic sound, I suppose, but in a totally different context. And I guess quite a big part of the work was about imagining that you can drop these other narratives over the top of somewhere, and see what happens when things get layered up in that way. And I suppose that's why I chose this very different kind of event with a very different person giving a very, very different narrative to all of the things that we normally associate with that space. So I've put this link in here. Hang on, I need to do it to everyone. So I thought it might be good to just let you watch it. It's about 5 minutes long. What it is like a little montage of images and a little clip of sound. So it's not like a edited video that takes you from the start to the finish of anything, really. So it's not linear in that sense. But yeah, it's about 5 minutes long, and it gives you a sense, I suppose, of some of the sound and some of the visual experience of being in that work. The person that you're going to hear speaking is called Colette. This is towards the end of her performance on her birthday, and she's reflecting on when she spent some time in a hospital after having a mental breakdown. This person is so amazing. She's lived about 20 different lives. She really is amazing. Was the end of a long and amazing evening, understanding the twists and turns of her life. So yes, I'll let you watch that now. There we go. That's there. Can everyone see that?
That's perfect. That's the link in the webinar chat window for anyone who's missed it. So let's all go and enjoy that. And we'll see you back here in 5 minutes or so. Amazing. Thanks so much, Nick. I disagree entirely that that didn't take us on a really nice journey from one place to another. That was exactly what it did for me. That was really great. I'm going to assume that everyone in the room has kind of found their way to the end of that video now. So we'll just hand back over to Nick quickly, and then I will jump back in.
I don't have much else to say about it really, I suppose. But yeah, I hope you got a sense of these bells, and I guess how this event both brought people to this place, but these bells also went back out into the community and became something that people use in their shops or for their local choir groups or for their meetings at or however they use them. The Govan Fair has one, and yeah, I hope they still do get used in their own special ways. And also the foundry still, I think, fires away at Galgale, and they make different parts of boats now, like different kinds of bronze aspects and things to their boats. So it's also great that continues to have a life beyond the bells. But yeah, I don't have anything else to say apart from it's a pleasure to revisit that work from 2016.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Nick. We're obviously running at some sort of capacity because that Nick arriving back there, John got bumped out of the call, but he's back in now, which is great news. Hi, John. You've rejoined.
I've taken all my technological skills to rejoin.
That's great. Cool. Okay, so what we'll do now is it's about 11:30. We've got till 12. We're gonna have a bit of a chat amongst ourselves just now, and then at some point around about 1:45, we'll start taking questions from those of you who are here as attendees. So if you've got questions brewing, either feel free after that to stick your hand up, or post it in the Q&A thing between now and then, and I will try and stay on top of what's arrived in there. What we'd like to do, I think, for the next 10-15 minutes is we're going to ask if we can just go around everyone that's here and see if we all have one question for one other person who's here on the panel. And
or perhaps an observation.
Perhaps an observation, yeah, or something to say that might provoke something from someone else. I am going to kick things off. John Purser's obviously so many things from your talk. My ears were pricking up left, right, and centre. We've spoken a lot in this project about what our relationship with the bells that we're going to get made is, and what the relationship between the communities that we hope to leave the bells with, what their relationship to the bells with. And a point in the talk, you introduced the role of a doer of a bell. This is not a term I'd heard before, and I just wondered if you could explain what is the doer of a bell.
It's a Gaelic word, giore. It essentially means a traveling person, but that was because it was the person who was in charge of the sacred objects. We're talking about early Christianity, in charge of the sacred objects when they were being carried, accompanying the abbot or the bishop or whomsoever it was. The abbot or bishop didn't necessarily carry these things, probably carry his staff, but not the bell and the book as well. The doer was the person in charge of those objects, and it was a hereditary thing, as many responsibilities in the Highlands were. They travelled down, including being abbot of Iona was often hereditary, not necessarily primogeniture, but hereditary. So they carried these around, and the bell was one of the main sacred objects. The book obviously was the Bible or a psalter, and the crozier was the symbol of the bishop's authority, and was a piece of wood. And sometimes, of course, there were miracles associated with these pieces of wood. If you stuck them in the ground, they sprouted leaves. Well, that was often because they were simply saplings. And if you stuck them in, that's precisely what they would do. But it was turned into a miracle. So that's the background to the Dures. They carried on right through to the present day, as that clip with the Reverend Tom Dick indicated to you, and he was very well aware of his inheritance. And it moved from being hereditary families into the Kirk and the minister of the Kirk. And a number of ministers that I met and discussed their doership were very conscious of the role, notwithstanding the fact that it's really not sort of standard Church of Scotland practice. And my piece was, in fact, partly in response to the fact that all the bells, or nearly all the bells, have been removed from the Isle of Lewis because they weren't sacred. So, yeah, weird history.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. I haven't really thought through a system for doing this, so I'm just going to say, I'm just going to hand the mic over to Nick and say, do you have a question for anyone else on the panel? And you are muted. Sorry, I'll try and
Sorry,
make
it
that.
is not my day for technology today.
Not anyone by the looks of things. It's okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I've got tons of questions, too many. But maybe I'll ask John and Alison if that's okay. I was wondering, I guess I just wanted to know more about your work with the diminished chord, and whether you could tell me more about the choice of that musicality. And also, I was interested in the duration. Obviously, they were attached to these moving bodies of the goats. I wondered about the boundaries of the work, like how movable was that, both musically and I guess physically, and what were the durations? What were the durations of it? Was it really was it like a 10-minute experiment, or did you leave them there? Did someone disappear?
Well,
No.
it's yeah. I mean, I'll maybe start. So the whole thing started off as a proposition. So we didn't ever think it would be made, and we made it for an artist called Nick Crow, who what was it, the Transpennine?
There was an exhibition in sort of turn of the millennium called Arts Transpennine, and it was kind of documented as a bit of a disaster because a huge amount of money went into it, but yet no one really saw anything that happened as part of it. And so this artist, the artist Nick Crow in Rawlinson, proposed another Arts Transpennine where he paid a whole load of artists £50 per artist to come up with a proposition, which then became a kind of non-existent successor to the existent festival that no one ever saw. So we proposed it, and the web link that we put for the project takes you to that page. But then actually, lots of people asked us about that work over the sort of years afterwards. And then eventually another artist, Michael Pinsky, said, no, let's do it. Let's make it happen. So we found a shepherd who was happy to spend some time acclimatizing a group of sheep with the bells tuned. And then it became part of an exhibition called
We can't remember. That's terrible. Lost O, maybe, yeah.
Called the Lost O, which was actually in Ashford in Kent, and it was connected with the Tour de France when it came through UK for the first time, I think. And so it was there the sheep were there for a while, because sheep are quite useful in graveyards to keep the grass down. And so they were positioned there for, I think, part of the exhibition, if not all of it.
Yeah, I think
sometime, at least a couple of weeks.
But we were just very lucky to meet a shepherd who had such a good interest in music and into like making sure they were happy and safe and working with their sheep with this project. So we were very lucky there.
And the musicality of it is, I mean, honestly, the work was kind of mildly satirical when we first made it. And a lot of people at that time was beginning to work with things like Max, MSP, and other softwares. And there was a lot of talk about generative music systems. We felt it would be just maybe interesting as part of that conversation to remind, as a reminder that a generative music system can be physical and it can be something that can exist out with digital technology of that time. But the choice of the jazz chord, I suppose, is partly because it's a leading chord, so it's always never resolving, and also, I guess, because jazz as a mode of music is something which is maybe not so connected with how we would understand the sort of bells that we would have encountered historically within livestock management and things. I hope that sort of answers it.
Shall we?
Yeah.
John Purser's got his hand up, so I'm just wondering if we jump to John for a question, and then we'll take a question from John and Ali in a couple of minutes. John Purser, on you go.
It was just a comment on the use of the dominant seventh, which is fundamental in classical music. When Beethoven had the impudence to start his first symphony with a dominant seventh, there was outrage because it was regarded as a discord, because the bottom note G and the top note F were discordant with each other. So that was the first sort of really scary use of the dominant seventh. But your point about it's not leading anywhere is very interesting, because if you take away the word dominant from it and you just take ta ra dee dee and you go up the scale, ta ra dee ah dee ah dee dee ah da 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 da, you have the scale as Highlanders like it. We don't want sharpened sevenths, which will go ta ra dee da 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 dee, which has a sense of direction. Don't like that in this part of the world, so it goes ta ra dee ah dee ah da dee, and I could not get students to sing ta ra dee da 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 dee. They would not do it. They all sang ta ra dee ah dee da da dee when I was checking the course. So there you are. Anyway, it was a good choice.
That's such a fantastic piece of information about it being kind of like a sort of modal scale for Highlanders, because we were thinking much more, because another thing as well, the sort of the dominant chord is also something that we are so much more familiar with now, and I don't think it grates now as it would have done in Beethoven's time.
It only grated on the ears of the fuddy-duddies.
Yes, well, that sounds like a good reason to have done it in the first place.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Maybe just while we're still with John, I mean, John and Ali, you were talking there about turning to sort of sheep as a way of thinking about generative, music in the age of Max MSP. But John Purser, I immediately thought of your circular score based around the solar clock as kind of trying to think in the same way about the historical and the analog worlds as being perfectly capable of a way of creating generative music.
Well, yes, in the Celtic world, everything goes in circles. Time is not linear. That's why Celtic crosses have a ring around them. The cross is basically an antagonistic form, with direction. Whereas a circle means that things come round again and is altogether a much more humane and philosophical way of thinking. Philosophically, you'll find it particularly in the work of the great Irish philosopher Scotus Eriugena, who was anathematized more or less because he maintained that at the end of all things, everything, hell, the devil, the lot, would return to its creator. And that, of course, was no good for the Christian church because it took away the element of fear. And Christianity depends upon fear in order for it to survive.
Out of interest, John, do you consider that a kind of visual score and something which could just be an expression as a drawing, a sort of kind of drawing? Because there is a tradition of the visual score.
There is indeed such a tradition. My draftsmanship is non-existent, and I regarded it as a very poor piece of draftsmanship. But Barry Killen and others seem to think that it was very expressive and asked
Rather charming, I think.
to use it. So there we are.
I guess if I can jump in with a question for Nick, I was, it's not really a question, it was more, it looked incredible actually, the community, and you could see from the audience how integrated your piece was with the Govan. And I was wondering if you had, oh,
gone.
she's gone.
They've gone.
They have gone. Okay. So my question was really about, maybe you've talked to Nick about this, about how you develop such strong links with your community. And, you know, it was brilliant when she was saying some of them are shop bells now, or some of them are with choirs, and, you know, how much work, I don't know if you've spoken with Nick about this.
Back.
Ah,
Did you hear that question, Nick?
time.
No, I didn't. I'm really sorry. Could you repeat it?
So it's not really a question, it was more a comment, and it was that how much I enjoyed seeing how integrated the players, the viewers, the participants were with the whole project in the area. And you know, for me, I particularly loved the fact how embedded the bells had become, like a shop bell, or for a choir, for tuning up, and how they lived on in the location. And I just wondered if you had any kind of words of wisdom for Cat and Hector, and of course, sorry, I'm forgetting everyone's name. It's Sinead. Like, you know, with working with communities.
Well, interestingly, I'm also remembering together doing one of those projects in Western Bartonshire, and I was interested to hear your introduction, and it is an incredibly complicated space to try to understand your agency as an artist, and yeah, where the lines are between the brief and the people and you and the thing that you make. So I respect and understand that. And I suppose in terms of, oh, do I have any words of wisdom? Not really. But yeah, it's good that you're looking for a bell maker. I just decided to learn myself, which, looking back, I probably could have yeah, had better training and expertise. When I look at some of the beautiful bells that we've seen today, I think, oh well. But you know, they had their own character, and they were sort of made by many hands. So they were made by a lot of kind of what I would call 100% amateur bell makers, which there was a pleasure and a joy to that. And a lot of them were very, very shonky indeed, you know, and some of them didn't sound so good either, until we got the sort of metal mix a bit more refined, I suppose. They gave a better ring in the end. I don't have any advice, but just a lot of intrigue, and really looking forward to seeing what happens with it, and hoping I'll be able to come and see parts of things, even though I know it's not necessarily for me. But yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes.
I think
When you go, Sinead.
There was something that John and Ali that you said that resonated with me, that was around finding the shepherd that was also interested in music, and I think, or the musicality of the bells. And I think there is something in that, finding the people that want to take part in the project. And I think that's some of the challenges we've come up with, particularly in phase 1, of some communities just not wanting to engage with this in the Highlands, and we can't pester people, we can't force them to take part in our project, and we wouldn't want to. And it's finding that balance, and finding those people that do want that space, and do want to take time and energy to engage with the project. And yeah, I think that kind of relationship with the community is really important to us, and it's a fine balance sometimes as well. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Absolutely.
Don Purser, have you got a quick comment, and then we'll jump. We've got a really interesting question in the Q&A, which is very pertinent to what we're all talking about at the moment. So let's hear quickly from John Purser, and then I'll steer it back.
It's simply that community engagement with bells all sounds very sweet and nice, and can be indeed. But if you go to Sardinia, the Mamoides parade through the town with bells which they have attached to leather jerkins on their backs, and they wear these, and they shake the bells like this, and they're scary as hell, and they're very much part of the community. So there is a whole other side to the significance of bells, the dark side, and one should not forget that these things also exist. It's not all sweetness and light.
No, absolutely. I think that's really interesting, and that probably just reflects back on my own initial reflection when John and Ali kicked us off, was just the extent to which that spread of project around bells covered a lot of things that were really the reasons why we wanted to engage with communities through bells, and actually included a lot of the dangers of using bells to engage with communities. For example, the comment on creating a work around spectacle, which is kind of something that was repeatedly and explicitly discussed with us by communities as something that they were trying to avoid, and that they wanted quietness and privacy, and yeah, there's just so much there to negotiate. I'm going to move over.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to. Oh, I was just going to add.
Sorry,
to
John.
Sorry, I was just going to add to what you were saying, that I think with our selection, it's necessarily, obviously, completely partial, but we were trying to reflect some sort of spread where there were different approaches in each project.
Yeah, amazing, and so much more the informative for it. So we've got 4 questions in the chat at the moment. One from Lisa Noble, who's asking, can anyone speak to the unique voice of a bell and identifiers that you use to categorize their personality and expression beyond simply tonality? And I think that's really an interesting question. I'm going to immediately bring it back to actually the quote from the piece of writing that I had at the start, which was about bells in Naxos. That culture, I can't bring it up in front of me because I've got too many windows open on my laptop at the moment, but I know they have a specific word that refers to the voice of a bell. And it's really interesting because the voice of a bell, they have, according to that piece of writing, there's a really interesting sort of sonic phenomenon in that culture where the shepherds that he spoke to are insistent that the bells that they use remain very, very consistent over time, like they sound exactly the same now as they will in 200 years. And that's the marker of a really good bell, but also that the voice of a bell improves over time, and that a very, very old bell has this kind of quality to it. So there's a really interesting thing there where the voice of a bell within that culture actually improves through the length of time that you spend listening to it, rather than through anything material about the bell. But I don't know, does anyone on the panel want to stick their hand up there and say anything about how we talk about the quality or the individual voice of a bell? Are we talking about traditional timbre things here, or John Purser?
It's very complex. The traditional bells that you have hanging in churches, all, of course, are regarded as having voices, and many of them have inscriptions on them. There's one, the highest bell in one church, which has a wonderful inscription, "Here goes my brave boys," because this is the first bell, you see, that's going to be struck, and it's like it's a little choir of voices, and the top voice is, "Here goes my brave boys," and off they go. So that when it comes to the actual acoustics of bells, this is very, very complicated, especially with the one you normally think of, the quotes bell shape. One thing that is true about them is that they cannot be tuned to a major sound. They have very many harmonics in them. It's not just one note. There's the strike note, but there's dozens of other notes. and you cannot get them to make a major sound until in Holland, I think it was, they got a computer to design it. And it does indeed make a major sound, and it looks hideous because it has a huge kind of beer belly in the middle in order to achieve this effect. So, but if I were to go on about the acoustics of bells, it would take forever, and nobody has all the answers anyway.
No, that's really fascinating, but it's great that you came immediately to inscription as well, which is obviously like a really interesting part of what we're trying to do, and to use that, the voice of the bell, to speak whatever it is, and to, you know, when it's told, to speak the inscriptions that are on the bells.
The architect Ian Begg created a handbell in memory of his son, who died. He was 21 or something like this, and Ian put on the bell the words "just be." That was it.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's really beautiful, and I think that speaks to the simplicity of some of the inscriptions that we've been gathering so far that have been you know, "we're still here," for example, is a phrase that kind of emerged from it, which seemed to carry the same simplicity as the bell has, as just a declaration of existence. Yeah, John, you had John and Ali have their hand up.
Oh, I think. Oh yeah, I did. I was worried I couldn't lower it for a second. I was just going to say about a unique voice of a bell. I think one thing that John said about how important it is that bells are tied to the landscape or the location that they are. I think part of the unique voice of a bell is when you recognize it. So if it's being struck in a community setting or as part of any sort of, you know, consistent situation, as you know it becomes unique, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and obviously pulls in all kinds of environmental factors such as the acoustic and context and time of day, kind of draws them into the voice of the bell itself. Amazing. I'm going to come back over to the chat quickly, because we are knocking on the door of 12
we have
now.
a few, maybe time for like one or two, and then we'll need to wrap up.
Yeah, I think a couple of these double up, so it's okay. And so Finn is asking, in the design of the bells for your project, are you particularly inspired by the historical quadrangular bells, excuse me, that can be found in Scotland and Ireland, or also the wider European livestock bell traditions? Short answer to that, we are particularly inspired by the quadrangular bells. We'd love to see that deployed, and we'd love to see those making techniques deployed as well. We are, you know, as all people at this stage in the project, we're open to suggestions, and we want to hear suggestions, and we want to have our minds changed, but that's definitely where we are at the moment, and it feels like the right thing to do, kind of from an environmental and a place sense of things. I think the question, I think hopefully what I've just said answers the question below. How it includes another note: how would the inscription be visible, engraved or raised up, etc. I think we're open to hearing something about that as well. Initially we thought about them as engraved, but it was really exciting to see that they were actually raised text in cast bells that Nick was working with, which is not something I'd necessarily thought of, but that was really cool to see. So yeah, we're looking to have that question answered for us. Is it decided, David is asking, is it decided where the bells go to live? No, it's not. We're working with a lot of communities. We're working with care homes, primary schools, a senior citizens network, individuals who have spoken to us about long COVID. We're working with all kinds of people, and we are still waiting to see that. In some cases, I think it will be really important that a specific inscription has a journey of provenance from the group that suggests the inscription to having it on the bell, and that we might try and ensure that that bell goes back to the community if they want it. But that's really only one way of creating that journey, and I can think of all kinds of reasons why bells might end up in all kinds of different places. And we're also thinking through even the possibilities of, you know, burying one of them, or just kind of trying to disseminate them into the community in a diverse range of ways. What materials are you wanting for the bell? Sheet iron bells, cast bronze bells, artist's choice. I mean, first answer to this is always artist's choice, because we want to hear what your suggestion is. I think what we've seen, and again, this would take, I'm sure, hours to answer, John Purser, but I might just, for the last minute, we might go back to him. It seems to be the case from what we've heard today that the Scottish bell tradition is overwhelmingly one of folded sheet bells that have then been brazed in some way, rather than a cast bell, a cast round bell. But maybe you could speak very quickly to the distinction between those two, significance in Scotland.
That's not quite right. There are two kinds in Scotland, and they're pretty well evenly divided. The first kind are the cast iron, the wrought iron bells. They're made of sheet iron, and these are folded and riveted. The other kind, which are equal in number at the very least, are cast bronze bells. These are with a very small tin content, I think. But they're more sophisticated in terms of their sound. They come from a century later, but they are indubitably cast, whereas the earlier ones are, as I said, sheet iron. John Creed reconstructed a sheet iron one with great difficulty. First of all, it was very difficult to get the sheet iron, and secondly, when he started working it with a hammer, it began to delaminate. So it's very difficult to get a big sheet, which you need a pretty damn big sheet of sheet iron to make one of these bells. It's very difficult to get it so beautifully made, so integrated structurally, that when you start forging it, it doesn't delaminate. As soon as it delaminates, ruins the sound.
Fascinating stuff. I think like that answer has just given me 10 more questions I want to ask. That's probably the case for everyone else as well. There's a couple of other things have come up in the chat around the involvement of communities in making the bells. I think what we'll do is we'll respond to a lot of this stuff by email as questions kind of keep coming in. If you could use as your contact, if you don't already have it, the email address info@lifearts.org.uk. Okay, so I'm just going to type that in.
I'm doing it now. Thank you.
Sinead's already on it. Any further questions that come up, if you fire them to that email address, we will send further information and answers out to you. Other than that, thanks so much to everyone for coming along, offering such an extraordinary wealth and depth of insight. I know it's the first purpose I mentioned, which was to teach art bells. Come away feeling like overwhelmed and enriched. So that's absolutely amazing. So huge thanks to John Purser, to Nick Green, to Thompson and Craighead for joining us from all over the country. And we hope to hear from everyone soon. We'd love to stay in touch with everyone about this project, whatever our kind of ongoing connectivity with folk are. And that's it. I am now going to wrap up my own chat, and the call will quietly end. So thanks very much, everyone.